Om Shanti. Good morning. We wanted to share Didi's bhog with all of you, so we delayed it from Friday to Sunday so that all of you could be present with us. So I think you've all been taking drishti from Didi. Didi's drishti was very, very famous. It gave spiritual birth to many souls. It enabled many souls to deal with their weaknesses. It allowed souls to move forward in their journey. Through Didi's drishti, they would get the power to be able to follow Baba's Srimad. So Didi's drishti is special. But before I move into a little bit about Didi, I want to talk about the song. And it's been very beautiful the last several weeks. The song that we hear before the Murli is actually the summary of the Murli. And I know that some of you know Hindi, but some of you don't. But you kept hearing the words Sankalp Shakti. Is that right? Did you recognize that? The power of thought. And so guess what today's Murli is about? The power of thought. So we'll be listening to that in detail, of course. But just one point I want to make. It's a question that's come, and it's connected with today's Murli. And so rather than postpone it, I'll share it now. And that is that sometimes when we are very attentive and we start creating elevated thoughts as Baba wants us to do, we still don't actually get the feeling of that. And the question is, why not? Well, think about the period of time that we've had with negative thinking or wasteful thinking. Today Baba's not even talking about negative thoughts, Baba's talking about wasteful thoughts, with the assumption that you've taken care of the negative thoughts. So whether it's negative or whether it's wasteful, all those feelings have been stored within the soul for a long time. And maybe it's pre-gyan, maybe it's also the sanskar of creating waste and negative thinking for many, many births, which it is, because we've been body conscious for so long. But never mind all of that. Even since coming to Baba, whether a year or 10 years plus, the habit of waste thoughts, Baba said in the Murli today, that habit hasn't left us. And so the feelings that are stored within the soul as a result of a long period of time of wasteful thinking are feelings which are very, maybe just ordinary or less than that. And so my effort of 1 day, 5 days, 10 days isn't enough to clean out all those other feelings that are still there. And so I mustn't get disheartened and think that, well, my effort isn't bringing any results, but it will. Just keep going, and definitely there will be results. But maybe the most important thing to practice that can turn things around is soul consciousness. The first and most powerful transformation is this: to come back to the awareness of soul and just be stable in that consciousness of the soul. And if I can be stable in that awareness, then my feelings start changing, because I begin to feel I'm a soul, I'm that eternal being, the immortal being, the being of light, the being of peace. And so if I can focus on that one aspect and sustain it, Because again, body consciousness has been with us for 2,500 years. And so a few thoughts, I'm a soul, and then I forget, and then I come back to it an hour later. Well, that's not going to change my deep, deep-seated awareness. I need to be consistent, constant, and attentive. And so first this practice, but then secondly, yes, the checking of the quality of thoughts, so that then truly I'm beginning to dig deeper and deeper and remove all the other thoughts. Some of you do your garden yourselves, some of you don't have gardens, some of you call in other people to do your garden. But those of you who do your garden yourself, you know that you have to dig. You can't just sprinkle the seeds on the surface and say, well, God will make it happen. In Satyug, we will just sprinkle seeds and nature will make it happen. But we're not there yet. And Prakriti, nature, matter is very tamopradhan. So you have to dig. But nature is tamopradhan because the soul is tamopradhan. And so digging deeper and deeper, getting into the depth of soul consciousness and elevated thoughts, and yes, there will be transformation. Let me hold that faith and let me continue with my practice. Two stories about Didi. One, October 68, and Didi's program was made to go on a tour, and I was meeting Sakar Baba, and Baba said to me, would you like to go on tour with Didi? And I'd seen Didi because she was the one who was looking after everything in the yajna since I'd started to go to Madhuban. And I knew her as a very wonderful person, so I immediately said yes, whatever Baba says. And it was a beautiful journey in which she shared many intimate experiences that she'd had with Baba, but also seeing her in action in service. But I then came back to Madhuban December with a group from Agra, and wherever Didi stepped, Baba would ask her to go further and further and further. And so from Calcutta then, Dadi Nirmal Shanta joined her, Baba's Lokik daughter, and Baba kept telling her, go on here, go on here, go on here. And then she was finally at the Kumbh Mela, and she'd been out of Madhuban by then over 3 months. And when she got the news, Baba left Saturday night, but she only got the news Monday morning. No mobile phones in 1969 by then. And the news, she'd left every place, wherever they were trying to call her, she'd left. And so finally when she got the message, then of course it was fast track to Bombay, Ahmedabad, Abu, and she arrived literally just at the moment that the coffin was going to be put on the hearse, and it was a big truck because Baba had said in a message, Shiv Baba, that let every one of the Abu residents catch a glimpse of Baba's face before that disappears for 5,000 years. And so they made sure that the face was visible, and I was in that procession with that truck. The whole of everybody who was able to walk was joining, and the Kumaris were right in front, just a handful of us. And everybody along the road was lined up. News had spread. It had been already 2 days, 3 days. And so everybody was on their doorstep or in their windows, at their windows. And some were throwing flowers, some were just folding their hands. But it was a very moving scene for all the residents of Abu. And so Didi arrived literally with Dadi Nirmal Shanta just at that last moment. And so the message that came later, because what happened was that's half of the story. The other half of the story is that when Didi left, it was after 10 days of being in a coma. And Dadi Janki had said to me on the phone, I was in London, Baba Bhavan, and Didi had said goodbye to me. She especially phoned before she went for her surgery. And then Dadi Janki was also in Bombay for her own treatment. And she would be phoning me and telling me what's happening. And at one point she said to me, it doesn't look as if Didi is in any pain or is suffering in any way at all. Her face looks so beautiful and so calm and almost joyful. And yet, of course, we know that she's in a coma. And finally, Didi left about 10 days later, and then Bhog was offered and so on and so on. And the message that came back was that why she had been in a coma for 10 days was because she had said to Baba, Baba, I was with you through your whole journey, but at the last period, the last 3 months, I wasn't with you. And she carried that in her heart, that she'd missed Baba's last period. And Baba said, Baba wanted her to be in the subtle region so that that complaint would finish and she would have the total experience of being with Baba in the subtle region. Now, can you imagine how deep is that soul's love for God, that God turns around the normal sequence of karma, and the normal sequence of karma is that the soul leaves one body and immediately goes into its next body. And God intervenes and says, no, I'm going to make space here so that this soul can experience being with Baba in the subtle region. That was Didi's love for Baba, but also Baba's love for Didi, but also the power of this individual who was very much the foundation of the yajna, because the first one to surrender, and so that set the pattern for many others. Amazing drishti, but also her humility, and never reading the Murli in class, she would say that's Dadi's job. But yet she was the powerhouse, the might. Baba said when he was putting the rose on Didi's head and another rose on Dadi's head, and saying that these are going to be the ones who are going to look after you all, the coronation of these two souls at that time, 21st January. Later Baba had said, Didi is the might and Dadi is the mic. And so right from the very next day, 22nd January, it was Dadi who was reading the Murli, and Didi was a student sitting in class, an absolutely accurate student there on time. But she continued this practice right till the very end. It wasn't for a short time, because Baba left 1969 and she left in 1983. And so through that whole period, she was Baba's student. Just before going to surgery, the last thing she was reading were the notes from Madhuban. Shantamani Dadi would send us notes from Madhuban. During Sakar Baba's days, she was doing that, and she continued afterwards with Avyakt Bapdada's time. And so Shantamani Dadi would be writing the notes of not just the Murli, but also whatever was going on in Madhuban. So we would get a beautiful flavor of what's happening. Now you get all the WhatsApp messages, but in those days we used to get Shantamani Dadi writing in her beautiful pearl-like writing. Literally her writing was like little pearls. And so she had been reading Dadi Shantamani's notes, and so her last gift to Dadi Janki was, because they were both together there. I've read these notes, now these are for you. Notes for Dadi Janki from Madhuban, Shantamani Dadis. It was actually a practice that started with Mama. When Mama would go on tour, then Baba would make sure that Ishu Dadi and then later Shantamani Dadi would send notes of the Murli to Mama, so she didn't have to wait 10 days to get the Murli to read it. Took 10 days in those days, but post took just a day, and so from Abu every day there would be post to Mama to read the notes of the Murli. So that system continued, but humility in being Baba's accurate student, and so she's definitely one of the 8 jewels. Baba had said that as time goes on it'll become clear who are the 8 jewels. And so Baba, Mama, Dada Vishwakishore, this is my calculation, Baba's never put a stamp on it, but I think also definitely Didi and Dadi and Dadi Gulzar, Dadi Janki. There's still space for one. So I don't know the name of that one, but because there's many others to pick and choose. But Didi definitely one of the 8 jewels, the one with the power to send away bad omens. That's the Bhakti memorial. If you wear a ring of the 8 jewels, it sends away all bad omens. So Didi, one of those souls.